You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We live F1. Hi guys, we're in Houston, and why is Missed Apex in Houston? Well, because we're a dope international organisation with friends around the world, of course. Friends like Mobil 1, NASCAR, 2311 team, and we've got some new racing driver friends here. So the main aim of today is that we're going to be learning about oils, lubricants, and motorsport technology, and I'm going to be unleashing Matt trumpets on their poor, unsuspecting global manager of all those fluids and liquids. But first, I thought, why not catch up with some racing drivers? So, first of all, they've both got very good CVs here. We've got IndyCar driver, F1 test driver, Ferrari Academy driver, Callum Eilert. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And we've also got broadcaster, triathlete, pundit, team principal of an Extreme E team. Oh, and something else. World Formula One champion. Hello, Jensen Button. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
So, can I ask first, we're here at the Mobil One campus. What are you doing here?
What are we doing here? Well, we're unveiling our new livery for the COTA round of the World Endurance Championship.
So this is the bit where you have to sit on a tyre.
Well, you can't really sit on the tyres. It's not like an F1 car. No. They're in the wheel arch in endurance racing. You'll learn. Yeah, it should be fantastic. It's an exciting championship. There's so many different manufacturers involved and so many great teams. And to have Mobil 1 as a sponsor and a partner, it makes it really special because I've spent so many years working with Mobil 1 through my whole Formula 1 career. I won 15 Grand Prix in Formula 1, and 14 of them were with Mobil 1. So to continue that relationship through to World Endurance Championship, yeah, it's pretty awesome.
So Callum, did you see how many times he said Mobil 1 and looked over? Do you want to get Mobil 1 in a few times?
Shall I do this?
I think it's good for the career. Here on Missed Apex, we get accused of being sort of very narrow-minded F1 fans and not realising that there's a world of motorsport out there. But you guys have had such a wealth of experience. If it's okay, I'd love to sort of nerd out and ask you a little bit about driving styles across the different series. I do warn you, please don't burst my bubble, that I think my iRacing experience is pretty much where you guys are. So we're talking more or less as equals here.
Okay. What is that?
Just to set that.
What is that? Is that gaming?
Sim
racing,
iRacing.
You're not allowed to call it gaming. Oh, you're not? Okay.
Sim. Oh my God, how dare you? So basically, we'd love to start with endurance racing. And I think the key difference that, as F1 fans, is the fact that you're working as a team. So what's it like having a teammate that you don't secretly loathe?
I'm looking at you. You don't loathe me? No. Well, we're in different cars. So we're still competitors,
Yes,
we still want to get the best result for the team, but our three drivers want to beat their three drivers in the 12 cars. So the 38 car, the mighty 38. But no, it's great working with drivers that you don't, your main aim is not to beat them. Yeah. It's to work with them to perform at your best. And my teammates are super young. I'm 20 years older than my teammates. So I'm almost their age added together. But it's amazing how far we've come as racing drivers, because in my early 20s I was not studying data like they are. But no, it's been a really good first year with Hertz Team Jota, working with these two youngsters that have so much experience of racing endurance, and now I jump in as the older guy, but with a lot of experience through my career, but not in endurance racing, and we've added that together, and it seems to be working well. But no, it's good when you see them out on track, you're like, he's quick. That's awesome.
That's good. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah, so it's a nice thing, because what people don't realise in F1, for example, the first person you have to beat is your teammate. He's in the same equipment as you. He's the guy you're judged against, because there's such a difference in performance with the different teams.
And how do you feel about, no offence, I'm more your age, the old sweats coming in? Do you go, oh, that's all right, he's beatable at his age, surely, I'm fresh and out of the factory?
Sort of, but at the same time, no, it's cool. It's cool to have so many different characters in the team, and also to race against so many different genres of people in motorsports. So no, and not in a bad way, but it's awesome to get people's experiences. Obviously, JB has a lot in Formula One, and actually, like you said, Phil, your teammate, my teammate, but your car teammate, he's got the most endurance racing experience in your car. Will Stevens in my car, who's raced in Formula One as well. It's just great to bounce ideas off all these guys.
So there's a lot of ex-Formula One guys and single-seater guys in the paddock. Do they have a an advantage, disadvantage. So in my equal experience from going from single seaters to GT cars in the sim, like things like the brakes don't work. You've got to brake about 3 times as much away. Is that a disadvantage?
It is, because when you come away from having all of that power in terms of braking power and downforce on the car, when you drop down to a level that doesn't have that, it's more difficult. Because you're like, oh, it doesn't stop, it doesn't turn, it doesn't do this. So it does take a while to adjust, I must admit. And it took me longer than I thought it would, but it does, because you're racing against the best in the world at what they do, and they've been driving this type of car for a lot longer. And weirdly enough, you know, you look at what we're racing in hypercar, it's very different to normal. You know, you have drivers coming from F1, you have drivers from the old LMP1 cars, you also have GT drivers, and the GT drivers are unbelievably quick in these cars because you've got to muscle these cars. It's different.
They're probably the best adapted to
it. When you look at the car, you think, oh, it's an F1 car with a roof. It's not. It's a GT car with more power and a bit more downforce. So there's a real mix, and I think that's what makes it really cool. You have got drivers from all over the world that can be competitive in it.
If I can get nosy about the driving experience of it, so does it feel like you're spending longer in the corner when you're compared to like Formula 2, Formula 1? Obviously, you've both driven Formula 1 cars, but you look at the onboards and you think, the corner's just gone before you think about it in an F1 car, whereas it's a bit more lingery in the sports cars.
I don't think you think about it. I would say, like, whether you're driving a slower car or a Formula 1 car, you kind of are pushing to the same limit, and the feeling is similar, except in these cars you're kind of fighting it more than a Formula 1 car. But yeah, I'd say that it is longer.
Definitely more happens.
Yeah.
More. I mean, in an F1 car, you brake, you wouldn't normally have oversteer on entry, turn in, a bit of understeer, then exit, you might have a little bit of rear movement. Whereas this, you arrive, a bit of oversteer, oversteer. So you're definitely fighting it more. But that's also a skill in itself, and you know.
It does make for better onboard cameras, because you're really seeing people like muscling around.
And the funny thing is, in motor racing, you could drive a Miata in racing, you know, the Miata Championship. That's MX-5, just so you know. And it can be some of the best racing ever. It doesn't matter how quick the car is. So what is cool about this championship is that they found a way to have so many manufacturers racing and them all be competitive. So, you know, you go to Le Mans and there's 25 cars? Was it? Yeah, there's a lot of hypercars that all pretty much have a chance of winning or being on the podium. And that's what makes it cool. And then multi-class racing, you throw a bunch of GTs in there, and it's nuts. It's absolute mayhem out there.
All the LMP2s in the high-speed corners are quite close, so you kind of have to wait a whole sector to be able to pass another prototype car.
Well, this is like, I'm glad we're getting into like the tactics of a 24-hour race. So I'm relatively new to, so I got bullied into watching the 23 one after resisting, which I believe you were driving a NASCAR.
Garage 56.
Yes, but was that officially a GT3?
Well, it wasn't anything. It was its own category. It was Garage 56. But GTEs were racing then, so quicker than a GT3. But no, we had our own entry, which was super cool. Didn't fit within the regulations, but it was taking a NASCAR, adapting it to what would work in a 24-hour race, which was unbelievable. And we turned up there and everyone thought, oh, these guys are going to be so slow. And they were even putting out white flags in the Porsche curves when the NASCAR was...
Because you were a hazard?
Because we were a hazard. Yeah. And we ended up being 3 seconds a lap quicker than the GTE cars. So it was epic.
But it looked oversized as well.
Well, it was gigantic. They didn't make it bigger.
No, I know.
It was what, you know, that is what a NASCAR looks like.
Maybe it was closer.
Yeah.
It was closer to you, yeah.
So how would that NASCAR have done, say, at Watkins Glen in a NASCAR field? Like, how different was it?
It would have been 5 seconds up the road.
Oh, well, faster.
Yeah, it's quite a bit. It's quite a bit. And you had paddle shifts. You didn't have the sequential box. It was just made easier to drive, basically. And at Le Mans, it was just the easiest thing. It was very cool.
So if you don't mind, I just wanted, while you were talking about the multi-class racing, and if you're at the quicker end of the field, and I just wonder like how much almost not snobbery, but there's a inter-class rivalry where it's like, no, you wait your turn. Hypercar, I'm taking this corner. Is there like an etiquette about it? And like you do see the smashes.
So what's advised in GTs is to stay on your line, right? The kind of GT has priority to take the line, but if you put the car in a position to overtake, they're not meant to make it difficult. The one thing that I think most would do is if they really don't want to be overtaken into a section or a corner is kind of cover off the line and you have to make the choice to overtake or not. But most of the time, if they cover off the inside, you're going to go into a position you don't really want to be in. I'd say that that's kind of the etiquette, is to stay online and not make it unnatural, shall we say.
So I've always kind of thought, and I'm curious to get both of your thoughts on this, that if you're doing that kind of racing, at the end of the day, you either want to be in the fastest car or the slowest class. But it's the in-between people who really have the hardest job because they get it coming and going.
I'd agree.
Yeah, I think the LMP2 car is the easiest car to drive, though. But because it's just got so much downforce and not a lot of power. And it's unbelievably good in the high-speed corners. So, for example, when we come up behind an LMP2 car at Le Mans, you can't overtake in the high-speed stuff. They might even be a tiny bit quicker. It's the straights that we can blow by them. But the problem is for the LMP2 car is that they can't overtake so easy the GTE cars on the straight. So it isn't the easiest situation for them. But glory in LMP2 is still pretty big, you know, because it's a category where all the cars are the same. So when you win, I think it means that extra bit. You know, Jota's won multiple times in that category, and I think that's what made that team stand out and gave them the opportunity to race in the top class this year or last year.
I'm still fascinated by the team element, and especially, like you said, lots of different, what did you call it, genres of drivers, vintages.
I think you mean of different, not just different eras, but different backgrounds, right? Like different, like IndyCar, F1.
But for example, you know, if you happen to find yourself sharing a car with a former F1 world champion.
It's not a former.
You remain like president, isn't it?
Yes.
So did I faux pas?
He's done it.
And you're supposed to know your stuff about Formula
Has it
One.
not worn off? Does it not wear off over time? Is it still brilliant being F1 champion?
I still have the trophy.
Yeah. Do you start every conversation with, as a F1 champion, I think that?
No.
When we have arguments.
Yeah. Exactly. I was thinking more like Christmas dinner. So, shall I carve? Listen, as a Formula One.
My wife's not into motorsport at all, so it's quite funny. And my kids aren't either. But
I think what you've done perfectly demonstrated what you might have to deal with when a huge presence in motorsport enters that team. My question would kind of be, you go, oh, if I put this in the wall, I'm putting Jenson Button's car in the wall. Does that change how you drive?
No, to be honest, I would say it's probably more relaxing because he's been through everything you can imagine as a racing driver. So, no, I would say you're probably one of the first to come if there is something bad where you go, yeah, it's all right, mate, it happens.
Yeah, I think that's the good thing about our team. We have guys with experience from all different types of racing. And if you're down, if you're having a bad day, you just call Norman over. Because Norman's always having a good day. He's always happy and he's like the life and soul of the party.
Except when his luggage doesn't arrive.
Yeah, then he's really pissed.
Yeah, all that'd do it to anybody. Yeah. I'm curious, you race two different cars for the same team. Now, I know like on each team, probably you share data and tips, and there's a rivalry between the two cars. But do you also get that information flow across the two cars to that same degree?
Yes, it is different. Even though we both cars want to win a race. Yeah. It's a very different atmosphere than what you find in other types of competitive racing like F1, IndyCar. You do share everything, and you're happy for the other car because we've. I think what's been pretty special with us is the 6 drivers all get on really well. You know, we had a very, very special time in Qatar where we had a driver coach basically work with us, which was great because you do learn stuff about each other that maybe you wouldn't have.
But even at your guys' level, you get a driver coach in.
Well, we thought it was hilarious because it just, from the moment we all met each other, it just clicked. It just worked. So I understand the reason for having like a coach for the 6 drivers.
It was more of a team bonding coach.
Did you have to make friendship bracelets for each other?
Of course we did.
Even better than that, probably.
It was better than that. But I understand it, but for us, we were lucky that it just worked, it clicked. So, when you see the other car doing well, yes, it's awesome. And every single bit of data is shared. There's so much data. It's unbelievable how much data there is. And that's one thing about these cars that's different to any other Formula motorsport I've been involved with, is the amount of data, the amount of switch changes that we can do inside the car. There's a lot less we can do in terms of setup out of the car. You get in the car and you have switches everywhere that kind of do the same thing, but it's slightly different.
Yeah, and When we were snooping around the garages at 2311, I couldn't believe it. I saw a NASCAR and it's got one button, and that's just for yelling at people. It's the yelling at people button. So this is, having the debates recently between cross formula. A single-seater driver could probably jump in a NASCAR and get it to move and physically go around a track, whereas you put anyone from another discipline into an F1 car, you'd be totally lost.
Yeah, well, I personally, most categories, yes, but I feel that what we drive is a lot more complicated than an F1 car. Yeah, we have so many different systems that F1 cars aren't allowed to have. So it's and then we have, on top of what we have in terms of with the diff and the braking system, we have traction control, which you don't have in a Formula 1 car. So we have lots of different switches for that. It's not just traction control on and off.
Driver can think, I need a bit more this, that, and the other. It's not the garage just yelling at you and stuff. So in a way, though, isn't that like it takes up so much of your mental headroom?
Exactly.
And then you're 24 hours into a race.
Yeah, no, totally. And the good thing is that the engineers have such a good understanding of the car that we can just call in and say, I have too much wheel spin here, or something's not working with the car on the braking, the locking at the rear is a bit too much at this point. What's the best thing to do? And they'll look at the data and then they can feed you the information, which sometimes you need, because sometimes you can get a little bit confused.
I have a question for the both of you, which is you have all these brand new fun systems to play with that you didn't have in IndyCar very clearly, didn't have in Formula One, you've said. Which one were you like, oh man, I really wish I had this when I was doing Formula One or when I was driving Indy? Which one has proved the most useful to you? How about that?
None of them.
It adds complication. Sometimes you just want, even if it isn't the best, you just have consistency.
Okay.
Yeah.
But no, I would say when it works well, the traction control is lovely.
But it doesn't always work.
No. And it really, because it depends on the camber of the corner and
The type of surface and
it's just.
So it's very clever how it adapts to a situation as well, and it adapts around a lap, which is quite impressive. I mean, the problem is that I wish that I was an engineer, so I had a better understanding.
Well, you've got time.
I mean, I am a doctor of, mechanical engineering. But
Did you get an invitation? Is it an honorary?
an honorary at Bath University, yeah.
Do you think that makes a difference for a driver if you've got an engineering head on? Like, can you really make a difference?
Now, yes, it makes a big difference.
So you know which ones you're allowed to tweet out and which ones you're not?
Exactly.
But yeah, especially in this. So is there a case where, the engineers can get a little bit like, come on, driver, stay in your lane. This is our bits and bobs. But
Well, no, they want you to decide yourself on what feels right, but...
So you get the blame?
Yeah, exactly, no. But also the great thing is, as I said, they are there and it's immediate. You'll say, I have this issue here, and they come back pretty much straight away. Try this, and you're like, oh, awesome, that worked, or it didn't work, and then they try something else. So the communication, like most things, right, in business, communication is key, and that's exactly what it is in motor racing.
So as primarily a Formula One fan, I went along to 6 hours of Silverstone. I found that to be like a great timed event. Be honest though, isn't 24 hours a bit long for an event?
Well, it's normally also from like the Friday the week before and goes all the way through the week. No, it's. I mean, it gets divided up because we try and sleep. You're out in the car for 2.5, 3 hours at a time. It's long, but also like the 10 hours felt as long in a certain way as well. 10 hours at Qatar. No, it is long. It's long.
So, but if you guys could pick, like, what's your happy place for a?
I would say 24-hour race. It's funny because you do Le Mans and then you come to these 6-hour races, and it feels weird. You're like, what? I'm just going to get 2 hours in the car, and it's kind of weird, but because that's still half an hour longer than an F1 race per driver.
I'll go for a 12-hour race. That's happy medium.
Yeah.
Jasper's got a question for both of you, which is, how do you mentally deal with winning a lot in junior series, being like the best driver in every paddock, and then you get into the single-seater ladder or F1 where maybe you don't have the equipment to be there, or you're stuck in the midfield or the back of the grid? How do you mentally keep that going after having been that guy all the way through?
I feel like that's directed for you because you didn't do much junior single-seaters, but no, I think you have to spend a bit of time to kind of digest, and it does bring you down for a little bit, but you just have to keep pushing and keep working and make yourself better and better. And you know, whether it's a opportunity or timing or situation, you can also create the luck yourself in that sense.
Yeah, and also a situation like McLaren Honda, where you find yourself suddenly it wasn't going anywhere, and there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can pull out of the drawer.
That was okay because I had Fernando Alonso as a teammate, so we had our own little battle, which was great. You know, we're fighting for 12th, 14th place, but at least if I beat Fernando, I knew I did a good job. And you know, I'd won races, I'd won the World Championship. At that point, it did get a bit tiresome to be finishing outside the top 10, and that's why I retired. You know, I was like, you know what, this is going to go on for a couple more years. I'm not having fun. I want to go and do other stuff that's fun in racing.
Because you guys seem to really on well, but the question is, if that had been at the front end of the grid, maybe less so.
Oh no, the battle was still there. I mean, I shouldn't really tell the stories, but
well, you can tell them and we can edit later. Don't worry.
No, we had a good time, and it was very competitive. Lots that went on behind the scenes that it was like we were fighting for a win with Fernando. Yeah.
In F1 as well, it's a reputation, so you're thinking of the next contract, perhaps, or
exactly.
Yeah.
But getting back to your actual question, which was how is it coming from winning in lower formulas to Formula 1? It's tough, and I think a lot of drivers, their career ends very quickly, very abruptly when they get into Formula 1 or IndyCar because they're going up against the best of the best. You know, they were. You know, every person on the F1 grid was that person in the junior formula, winning every race. So it's difficult, and I remember when Kevin Magnussen joined McLaren back in 2014, he did really well in the first race, and then it sort of tailed off.
Oh, yeah, like P2 in the end.
Yeah, and then I spoke to him sort of 3 races in. He's like, I didn't think it was going to be this difficult. Really? He said, I thought I'd come in and win everything. It's like, doesn't quite happen. It doesn't quite work like that.
Funny, you don't hear that like in the interviews. In fact, there was only one time a driver surprised me with that. It was Kovalainen when he subbed in for Kimi Räikkönen, and in the interviews just went, yeah, that was a lot more difficult than I thought. You don't admit that, do you? You've always got to find something to blame, surely.
Well, drivers these days in F1, they're very open with their opinions and their feelings, which in some ways is good, but in some ways you need to hold certain things back because people play on that. People use that to their advantage, your weaknesses, and it is a mental game, it really is. You know, when you look at someone like Alex Albon, who was a great driver in junior formula, and he went to Red Bull, raced alongside Max, and he destroyed him. And that could have been it for him. End of his career, done. But luckily enough, he was picked up by Williams, and he's performing exceptionally well. Pierre Gasly went up alongside Max Verstappen, got destroyed. Again, could have destroyed his career, done. Luckily enough, he had the opportunity to come back, and he's so talented. And it shows that everyone in F1, for example, is unbelievably talented. Yeah. It's all the mental game and where they find themselves in a situation within a team.
That's a great question, Jasper. Rob says, actually, we were talking about your individual driving styles earlier. What does Jenson think about his reputation for having a very smooth driving style? There's a perception that was it a deliberate choice or something accidental, a happy accident of your natural style? And you were saying Callum is like maybe the opposite, very aggressive.
Not very aggressive.
Subtly aggressive.
Subtly.
Oh, subtly.
It came from my dad, actually. So before I started racing in go-karts, my dad used to go out and stand on the circuit of where he thought I should turn in, trusting his 8-year-old son to not hit him. But for me, that was always good because I could judge things and trying to be as precise as possible. I spent a lot of years as a young kid racing in cadets, which is super slow engines, so you had to be so precise. And the last year I raced, I won the championship and then moved up, but I kept that style of trying to be as smooth.
Because you're trying not to drop any speed.
So you're listening to the engine revs the whole time, trying to keep the minimum rev as high as possible. So it sort of continued from there. I used to watch Alan Prost, who was my hero. He used to be ultra smooth as well. So that's where it came from, and it continued through my career. And it had its positives, feeling conditions. There were some negatives as well that I'm still trying to get rid of, which is tyre temp, front tyre temp, which made it really difficult even when I won the championship. I didn't perform at certain races because I couldn't get the front tyres working. And it's like, oh, it's easy, just work the tyre harder. No, it's not. It's a lot more difficult than that.
Explain why in interchangeable conditions you were perhaps feeling your way around well and able to make some calls.
I could feel a lot through my bum, whereas I think a lot of people use their eyes more so to see a condition. You're like, well, it's wet, I'm going to put wets on. And I would always feel it before I decided what I wanted to do in terms of choosing tyres.
How often do you just look at what everyone else is doing and go, oh, sod it, I'll just stay out? What's the worst that could happen?
It matters what you are in the race. If you're fighting for the win, you can't take massive risks. If you're further back, you can take more risks. But it's also tricky, for example, with these cars, we don't have tyre warmers. So if you want to be brave and jump to slicks in a damp condition, you're really brave, because these tyres just don't work when it's wet.
And you're a little more aggressive?
Supposedly, yeah.
Supposedly.
I've always kind of maybe gone over the limit and come back. That was kind of more my style. But no, I struggle more with rear deg. That was always my thing. So
He's unbelievably good at getting up to speed, getting to a pace.
no, sometimes. In the F2, that was something I had to learn to bring back a bit with the Pirelli tyres. But now it's more just.
Is that annoying, the Pirelli tyre?
Everything these days you have to manage.
Right.
You know, they don't have the same.
It's not a no.
They don't have the same materials or oils. They're not allowed to use the same in the tyres as what they were back in the day.
There was lots of bad for the environment stuff, which was great for driving.
Tyre grip.
Right, okay.
So you look at Michelin, for example, in F1, the best tyres. You know, now the tyres we have are very different to back then. For a reason, because it's an endurance tyre, we're all running on the same. But also because there's certain materials that they can't use that they could use back.
I mean, for us, they last an incredibly long time. To be fair, okay, they're tough to get up to temperature, but for how heavy the car is, for them to last as long as they do, and to be able, like at Qatar, to do triple stints on these tyres is incredible.
Yeah, I was going to say you do that, and it must be a real challenge because it's probably very traction limited because that's where the car makes its most lap time. So managing the rears out of the exiting the corners is
Normally, yeah, but you end up trying to balance the car so that you're not wearing one axle over the other axle a lot. So although the traction is the main one, you would say on average, you still wear out maybe a front left or a front right. Qatar, we were wearing out the front left a lot. Brazil was front right, I think, and rear right.
So the thing is also we're limited on the set of tyres we can use in a race. So you'd love to have a new set of tyres every time you went out, but you can't do that. So you end up mixing and matching tyres.
Sometimes you get a front right new. Sometimes you get
you can do that.
3 tyres.
Yeah, of course, yeah, and yeah. We're not giving away our secrets.
No, but still, like 2013 with the tyres blowing up, that's because they were switching them around.
No, but we have to. That's part of it, because otherwise we can't make it to the end of the race.
You can mix compounds as well.
You can mix compounds, but also sometimes you don't want to do all 4 tyres because it takes longer to do the pit stop, and also the warm-up takes longer on the outlaps. So you need to, there's so much information to take in for the strategy. And then, for example, the last stint in Brazil, we had our qualifying tyres on the right. And compared to a new set of tyres, it felt completely different car. So there's so many things that go into getting the right strategy, which isn't just fuel stops. It's to do with the tyres as well.
Do the engineers ever use that strategy of taking, like, say, a 2-stint tire and a qualifying tire to help address driving challenges of the car, balance front to back, left to right?
It would be considered, but normally we kind of have a set plan A, B, C, maybe a D. Right. And then that can be adjusted if really there is a predominant balance that you need to address. But this season we haven't really had to.
And the other question I want to ask, because you did do a fair amount of IndyCar driving, is how, we talked about the Pirellis, because you've both had experience with those, but how do the Firestones rate in your tire pantheon of motorsports?
I knew you were going to do this.
Yeah, talk about tires.
It very different, especially to the European side of things, because in like an IndyCar weekend, you push from the moment you come out the pits all the way through the weekend. In every single pit entry, pit exit, whether it's brand new or old tyres, you're pushing 100%. Even in qualifying, there's not really much tyre prep. You might do it if the compound's very soft for that weekend, but you come out, you push straight away, and you're just not worried about the tyres, and when they drop, they drop. So that is very different to the Pirellis, where you have to do an out prep, out lap, warm up lap, push, then a cool down, and a push again.
Less fun. That does sound less
It is. I mean, that was something great about IndyCar is you're just pushing every lap until the thing can't take it anymore.
So do you want to ask both of you about America? Because we're here in Texas. I've not seen a single horse yet, so it's a little bit disappointing. But what I love about my trips out to America is, unlike the Brits, they have fun on purpose. They have fun out loud. They don't have to accidentally have fun and pretend they weren't trying to have fun. But you guys have both, you've done a NASCAR race.
I've done 3 NASCAR.
You've done 3 NASCAR races. Apologies.
3 road races.
Yeah, COTA, Chicago, and Indy.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, Chicago was awesome.
Wild race.
It's wild. Yeah, it's totally wild. Especially NASCAR. You know, talking about tires, NASCAR tires, they're interesting. 3 corners to warm up, and then they overheat on turn 5, and that's, you just deal with it. You just deal with that feeling.
You just don't have tires anymore.
Yeah. Because they use a fabric belt instead of, there's no metal in the carcass of so it overheats very quickly. But I loved the experience. You know, you expect to go into NASCAR as a circuit racer and go, I'm going to blow them away. Yeah. Going to blow them away.
But they've improved a lot in the road.
Yeah, and there's a lot of youngsters in NASCAR now that have road course experience. So I was amazed, first of all, by the talent on road courses, by how crazy they are, and how you do not have 1 second in a race to relax. No. You know, in endurance racing, there's moments where you can relax, you can breathe. In NASCAR, you cannot breathe for a second. There's always someone there trying to drill you or drive you off the circuit. You know, I did the first few laps around COTA when I raced last year, and I always had someone alongside me.
And it's not like a foul either. That's just the part of it.
Yeah. I mean, they're always there. It's like you're banging doors, and as soon as they get 1 inch overlap, it's their corner. Right. So you can't turn in, because if you turn in, they just turn you around, and that's okay. You're allowed to.
But at some point, you go, do you know what? I can do that as well.
Yeah, and then it's awesome, because I got hit at turn 1, and then I just looked at him on the exit turn 1 and just turned left and hit him. And he backed out. I was like, oh, this is fun. Yeah, it's really good. But I mean, you don't want to mess with the wrong people, and you want to be as good as you can out on track, because if you mess with them, they're going to mess with you. So there's an understanding, I would say, on track. But I love the experience. If you ever get an opportunity, you should try and race.
I was going to say, I'm not sure you're selling it very well.
Maybe not an oval.
No, I would do you haven't done an oval, so I would do the ovals. Yeah. I like the ovals.
They look terrifying.
You can do ovals.
And how did you find IndyCar? I think it's not quite as full out wild as NASCAR.
No, not in terms of the contact. I have to say the rules in the US are different. It's completely different in NASCAR compared to IndyCar anyway. But yeah, they have a different way. I think IndyCar you could rub a bit and get away with it, and the cars were very strong. But the racing was super competitive, also longer than what I was used to in Europe. The F2 races were about an hour long, and the Indy 500 was 2.5 hours, maybe 3 if there's a lot of yellows. And yeah, it's just raw, tough racing. Lots of bumpy circuits. I would say the smoothest circuit is still bumpier than Monaco. So yeah, getting used to that was quite tough, but it's a great fun series.
I just say I love the attitude of the racing out here. Like especially things like the driver parades where they've got the fireworks going off and like yelling everyone's name. You know, it's a celebration. And was it Austin? They had the announcer do it, and all the European fans started going, "Oh, this isn't very Formula One. You can't do this." Thank you so much for your time, guys. Just want to end on one question from Mark quickly. He just says, Jensen, if Ross hadn't bought the team back in 2009, what was your backup plan?
He only bought it for $1. I would have bought it for $1.
Buy the team.
There you go.
God, life, it could have been so different. Jensen Button, team principal, team owner. Yeah. One day, still time.
There you go. That's your answer.
Jensen Button and Callum Ilott, thank you so much for your time and being on Missed Apex podcast.
Hey everybody, Matt Trumpets here for a very special segment, and I'm joined by Spanners, who swears he has some clever things to say.
I know engineering. I'll have lots of clever questions. I'll save it, if anything.
Yeah, I'll wake you up when it's over.
Thank you.
Okay. We are joined today by the Director of Global Motorsport Technology at Mobil 1, Tomek Young. Now, welcome, and thank you for sharing your very valuable time with us.
It is my pleasure. It's always exciting for us to talk what we do because it's slightly behind the scenes. Our brand is on the cars, but we also like to talk about things that we actually do.
Yes, well, this is one of the things that I'm really interested for our listeners to learn a little bit more about. So why don't we start at the absolute top? In terms of motorsport series that you directly work in, you develop custom solutions for, could you just rattle them off for us so our listeners have an idea of the breadth of the research and technology you're working on?
So typically, and it's pretty much every time, typically when we have a sponsorship relationship, when our brand is on a car, on a motorcycle, some type of other vehicle, our products are also present in the car. And very often we work with the team in a technical partnership format to give them more performance, to make the car go faster, farther, and longer. And we are in a lot of series. We are in Formula One, we are in WEC, in IMSA, in NASCAR, MotoGP, drag racing, a lot of grassroots racing. We are also in WRC.
You should have just said name the ones he's not in.
You're right. That would have been a better question.
That, and then you could have just gone lawnmower racing. But everything else we're in.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. So let me ask the kind of question that generally drives people such as yourself nuts. Can you, in any general way, quantify the advantage you bring to a team that goes from, say, an off-the-shelf solution to a custom solution? And I'll make it worse by asking, is there a way you could sort of quantify what the fuels contribute versus what the lubricants contribute?
We have a portfolio of commercial racing products, which you can buy and race with. And we then have a portfolio of solutions that we develop specifically for motorsports teams. These tend to be modified. And this is for people who leave no stone unturned. And if you want to be a champion, if you want to be winning, we know this in any discipline, not just in motorsport. You have to look at everything, find every last source of advantage. And I think it is as much about performance as it is about attitude.
Okay.
And we can find both. We can be a part of the team. We speak the same language. We know the application. But we can also give you performance. And at times it's surprising, especially for teams that have not looked at this area. Maybe in a while, they became a little stale in the area of mating the fluids to the hardware. We can step in and you have also a number of solutions. So you have an engine oil, you have a gearbox or transaxle oil, you have often some type of other products, including greases, wheel bearing greases, CV joint greases. We supply hydraulic fluid.
Really? Okay. I didn't know that. Let me follow up on that then. And everyone will know you, especially because we're mainly a Formula One show, that we do some MotoGP and other stuff too.
But we'd become a NASCAR show now.
Well, we do that too.
We're broadening our horizons.
We are.
Yes. Good.
Most people will think of you in terms of your contribution to fuels through Formula One. We've heard in the past, it can be a significant performance boost. But in your opinion, is it the fuel or the lubricants that really offer the biggest area for exploitation in terms of improving car performance?
All of the energy of the Formula One car comes from the fuel. As much as we talk about aerodynamics, as much as we talk about hybridization and other elements, still at the end of the day, all of the energy comes from the fuel. So the fuel is clearly very important. All of the protection comes from the Mobil 1 engine oil and other Mobil 1 lubricants. So it's equally important. Maybe you look at power for one of them and durability for the other.
Okay.
But within the technical regulation for Formula One, both are equally important.
So because I don't know, which is it different fuels and oils with different teams?
Absolutely. Okay, that's a great question. Maybe that's something we should explain to people who are not familiar with this area. Formula One is a constructor series. You develop the car, the team develops the car. We are there as a partner supplying these liquid products and also greases. So these are developed specifically for the team, and each team, each PU manufacturer uses a different supplier. So it's an area of competition as well. Other series might be different. For example, maybe a fluid could be mandated in some of the series. Let's just use WRC as an example.
Okay.
The fuel is so-called spec.
Right.
So people would say the fuel is spec. What it means is that Formula One also has a spec that every supplier works against. In WRC, there's only one supplier. Everybody uses a common fuel.
Right.
So Formula One gives us this opportunity to differentiate ourselves against others. So we're with Red Bull Racing, Oracle Red Bull Racing in Formula One.
Right. And you would supply then, that would be a power unit associated thing, or could, not that it would make any sense, but theoretically someone else could also supply it for a different team, different engine, or is it really to the point where it's such a loss that no one would, in their right mind, would do such a thing?
It's a good question. And, instead of commenting maybe, who uses what is, typically, the teams supplied by a given PU manufacturers use that common solution. Actually, there was a story that was a bit controversial at the time when at some point in our Formula One journey, which we've been a part of Formula One forever.
For a while, yeah. Jensen was talking about that earlier.
From the very beginning, with various teams, with various PU manufacturers. But there was a moment when, as a part of our journey, we proposed that we would like to do a solution for a team that we sponsored at the time that was using a PU power unit from a manufacturer, and they already had a supplier. And there was a source of a few laughs that I think you could still find on YouTube. People saying, "Oh, there's no way somebody can step in and redo all that work that probably took years to do and millions of dollars to progress to complete." And we did end up delivering a solution at the time, but it is not a common scenario.
Okay. So let me ask a little bit more about this, because this has been something that I've been really curious about, which is in the development cycle, and we have a new power unit coming in 26 to Formula One. What is the collaboration like? Do they just say, "Oh, here we have a new combustion chamber design, figure something out for that"? Or is it more of a back and forth between the two of you, both on the lubricant side and on the fuel side?
Well, it could be the former, but what we really like and what we usually aspire to do is to get into the effort early, to truly be a part of it.
Okay.
As experts in lubrication and people who know a few things about engines, we would like to start before that engine fires, before it's designed. So specifically against the 2026 specification, we started working on these solutions a few years ago already.
Oh.
So we are actually in late stages of the development. So we started working on them when the effort only involved a few people. And we were sitting there with a piece of paper, in front of a computer screen, trying to ideate what the solution could look like. And that's optimal for us, because you have less, at that point, there's no limits. At that point, you can still talk about changing the flow through the bearings and the pressure and the clearances. Yeah. They're not defined yet. At that point, we can offer a range of solutions which is much broader than the situation when you approach us. We have this car, it is ready to go, you cannot touch it. Give us more performance. We'll try. We always try.
So I want to ask about that then. One of the regulation changes that I'm aware of, and I have so many questions, but we're talking about Formula One right now. One of the big regulations is they're limiting the amount of dyno testing for the power unit manufacturers. Does that have an impact on your ability to develop a product? Does it force you to either go like the CFD route, or are there other ways you're allowed to test that the power unit manufacturers aren't?
It does change the approach. And what we always say is that the racetrack is this ultimate proving ground. The racetrack is a laboratory. And I have to tell you, you learn a lot when racing. You learn things that are unexpected. You learn things that cannot be predicted, that cannot be easily tested in the lab, even if you have a fully instrumented chassis dynamometer. But we try. we try CFD, we try various actually ways of modeling, not just CFD, for both lubricants and fuels. We try to learn from benchtop tests, we call them, so these are tests that are typical for laboratory. So if you look at our facilities, we have labs. A lot of us are chemists, a lot of us are chemical engineers. We actually, wear lab coats and safety glasses, and we go into a lab and instead of firing an engine, which we might also do, in Formula One, typically, it is the PU manufacturer who tests the engine, but we might use maybe a friction test, or maybe like a traction test, which assesses how molecules interact, how much energy is lost in that molecular layer that is between the piston or the ring and the liner. And we learn a lot from it, and some of it correlates, some does not, but over time, if you're in it long enough, you try to develop that understanding. And then when you have an understanding of how molecules play with the engine and how you can actually assess without firing an engine how they play in that engine, you become not only competent, but you actually become somewhat powerful in that space.
Okay, so you have like a global awareness of how things work, and it gets crisper, more accurate over time, not just from testing, but from the actual racing. You can understand what might happen. So tell me real quick, because you mentioned this, and then I want to come back and ask a little bit more. What is one surprising thing you've discovered trackside that you had zero, like you looked at in the lab, you're like, yeah, no problem, and then halfway around the lap it went boom?
Wow. And these are maybe topics, so what you from time to time discover, and which admittedly we try to avoid it, but things as simple as compatibility issues.
Okay.
So there's various materials in that car, and we try to always assess and test compatibility. It's an area that we spend a lot of effort on.
Okay.
And we always tell the team, please make sure to share with us every elastomer type that you use, every coating type.
Oh dear. I'm sensing where this might be going, but continue.
Whatever.
Is there, whatever. Any type of material, rubber.
Yeah.
And we always, we get components. We get a list of components. We might dip these components in the fluids. We might check their physical and chemical changes that happen to them. We often send fluids and components for long-term testing. But it is inevitable that we try to avoid it, but it does happen that the team just forgets about that one critical piece. Maybe there's a piece of even thing as simple as a hose or some type of coating that was introduced. Perhaps a glue that's forgotten, that gets exposed to that fluid and fails.
Yeah.
And that, hopefully, knock on wood, that doesn't cost you a race. But it certainly causes a lot of, sweating and additional effort. And this happens from time to time.
It feels like you know which times that has happened and you don't want to say.
Yes.
That car's stopped all of a sudden and you go, oh, hang on a minute.
We'll have to go look at every stoppage over the last 10 years and see if we can figure out which one it was. So this would be like, to translate to our less technically detailed listeners, this would be like oops, I put this steel fastener on the aluminum and it's turned into a singular mess now.
Yeah, that would be a good example, maybe in the space of sailing and racing in sailing, we if you bond some incompatible metals, things can result from it. Similarly, in an engine, if you introduce a new metal, the environment can be corrosive. You have combustion gases. Some of them make it past the ring pack. Again, that's maybe highly technical, but you have the combustion chamber, it's isolated. An engine is a beautiful reactor.
Yes.
It's this beautiful chemical reactor. And we control this reaction so easily. We press the gas pedal and the reaction pace, changes, and we extract power so easily from that engine. That power is, in a rotational form. It's a unique, beautiful solution. We as humans have been refining it for over 100 years. So now, some of these gases in this beautiful reactor actually, they're also dirty and corrosive, and they make it into the engine. if you have metals that are susceptible to corrosion, which are introduced, and maybe without our knowledge, they can degrade. This causes wear. This causes, potential issues. Even it could cause a catastrophic failure. You try to avoid it. So the technology of Mobil 1, it tends to be robust against this very harsh environment of very high temperature, highly corrosive elements, flow that's maybe insufficient, very high pressures as well.
Okay, so this is an area that I want to pick up on a little bit more. When you go to a team, like say Red Bull, and say, oh, as I know you have done, we have a new improved lubricant, because you did a lot of interviews about this, I believe, in 21 with your new, and we think that it's going to improve your ability to operate at high temperatures. Yes. What are the knock-on effects going to be for the rest of the team? What is that going to allow them to do that they couldn't previously do?
That's a great question. And I want to start from saying that, the teams and ourselves, we always expect that there's some improvement over time. And that's one of these realities of motorsport. Something that maybe, we are so acutely aware of, but maybe not everybody is. To be in that car, to be in that motorcycle, you need to be better than your predecessor. You need to be better even than your previous solution. So going into 2021 was a very successful year for us, followed by 2022, which was fabulously successful. The engine was changing.
Yeah, it was fabulous what Honda did with that engine.
Exactly. And, we are there working with them. So what an amazing partner, who is willing to leave that every stone unturned and basically develop a new power unit in a period of months. And what we are able to do is quite unique in this situation. There was this concept of a size 0 engine contemplated actually in the past, by Honda with a previous partner. And this was, again, it was one of these topics that was ridiculed slightly. People said, well, it's a good concept, but good luck with it. And, it was abandoned for a while and then came back with vengeance for, in 2020, going into 2021. And because that engine was changing and because we were there, we were able to offer solutions in a form of, lubricant and a fuel. And that lubricant addressed the needs of that smaller engine. So the smaller engine, maybe less cooling, tighter packaging. There was also an ambition that maybe, some of the air that flows through the car could be used for aerodynamics and not for cooling. So what we developed is a very robust Mobil 1 formulation, which was highly resistant to extreme temperatures, which allowed the engineering team that works on the chassis to use some of that airflow as well. And a combination of the new power unit with changes to the car were ultimately successful.
Okay, I'm being told we don't actually have another 90 minutes for this conversation, which is what I would spend every minute of that talking to you about this. But in Formula One and in other series, we hear a lot about sustainability. Obviously, you have new fuel specifications coming in for 2026. But the thing that interested me about this lubricant you're discussing at the time was you talked about it had a fairly high sustainability percentage. And that's not something that really gets discussed on the motorsports side at all. But you must be very proud of being able to not only produce such a solution, but to make it more sustainable than what came before. Is that an ongoing part of what you're trying to do? Or was it just, it happened to work out that this component was sustainable?
Thank you so much for preparing these most excellent questions. And on the question of sustainability, indeed, it's such a source of pride for myself and the team, the company and the brand. I think what we were able to show through motorsport is that you can use a solution that meets sustainability requirements, that's capable of reaching some of the designations, and win championships. And as consumers, I'm careful to venture into this space because I don't want to talk about people in other industries, but as consumers at times, we're exposed to this solution which is offered as sustainable, and it might have elements of inferior performance. And I'm thinking about maybe like some biodegradable cutlery. Maybe, the early version where in Texas you put it in a piece of, in your meal, and
you have to compromise for that sustainability.
Yes, and that's what we don't want to do. We don't want to compromise. We want to give you a solution which is better than what you have today and has these sustainable dimensions. And being able to accomplish it and demonstrate it by winning a championship was a moment of great pride.
Tomac Young, thank you so much for taking your very valuable time and sharing a few insights with us here at Missed Apex. And hopefully we'll get the chance to chat again sometime in the future.
Thank you so much for the time, and I appreciate you approaching me in our year of 50th anniversary of Mobil 1. So, we've worked on it for 50 years, and we're going to continue to innovate.
We look forward to it.
Well, that was different, wasn't it? And kind of cool. Check out Missed Apex chatting to F1 world champions, not former F1 world champions. But Jenson Button was exactly as cool as you'd expect him to be. Really generous with all his answers and very friendly before and after the interview as well. And I hope you don't mind us guys sort of going, broadly more into motorsport and driving styles, because I think it's been kind of fun to broaden our horizons with Mobil 1, 2311 and NASCAR, who have been very cool in involving us in a bunch of stuff. So that was them preparing for a round of World Endurance Championship at Circuit of the Americas. And they still gave us, loads of time as a random F1 podcast. And then obviously we're going out to Watkins Glen, having previously been at Darlington with NASCAR as well. So we are going to do another NASCAR special, but it's because of that tie-in that we were able to talk to Juan Pablo Montoya, and we were able to talk to the Jota guys just now as well as like what I thought was quite a poetic description of lubricants and oils from Tomac Young there as well. And thank you very much to Matt for the support in both those interviews and for pulling off a very interesting tech interview as well. So midweek, we're planning to do a bit of a strat special, Strategy Corner with Mike Caulfield, and I'm hoping we can get JR Houston from 2311 as well, because he's a massive F1 fan and he's their lead strategist. So, if he jumps on with a kind of expert strategist eye, I think he can probably ask Mike Caulfield better questions and make better observations than I can. And then me and Matt are heading off to Watkins Glen on Thursday, and we're actually going to the book launch for Matt's wife's book, which is a romantic novel around Formula One. So we'll get Christina and Matt to do a bit of a promo and a bit of a review. It's going to be a favourable review, isn't it, of that while we're in New York. Then off to Watkins Glen, and we're going to have really great access to like drivers and personalities within NASCAR, I think. So it'll all be fun and interesting. It does mean that me and Matt will miss the race review for Baku. That's the first time that we've done that. So we could either have delayed it till Monday or put in a substitute crew. But to be honest, we've been building up squad depth for so long here at Missed Apex that I don't think you'll notice that we're gone. You will be in the capable hands of Jono, the young Australian reporter gentleman. And we've got a young dynamic crew where we've got, well, youngish. They're all aging out. We've got Scott Stuffy Tuffy on, Kyle Power, and Chris Catman Turner. So hopefully that'll be a lot of fun, and you'll be kind to them in the live chat. We'll go live at 8 p.m. UK. And then me and Matt will be back midweek. Summer's over, which means for our patrons, we will kick up our patron-only content as well. It's a lot of nonsense, but we do enjoy doing it, and it is completely skippable. So that's up to you. If you want to support us at patreon.com/missedapex, a large part of why we've been able to go and speak to the likes of Jenson Button and Juan Pablo Montoya is because we have patron support. So if you'd consider signing up for a little while, patreon.com/missedapex. And a big thank you to our current patrons, because the dropout rate for patrons this season has been the lowest we've ever experienced, including over the off season. So we're incredibly grateful. Until we see you next, work hard, be kind, and have fun. This was Missed Apex Podcast.